Okay, this is a follow-up video on the quick login solution that I created. Somebody in the comments on YouTube was kind enough to let me know that uh, when certain conditions were occurring, primarily when both the username and the password were left blank, that it was logging in and things were working as if you had logged in correctly, which obviously is not what you want to happen. Um, But in the previous video, I only took it so far. I didn't go into every scenario and error check on every little thing. It was just kind of meant to be an intro, but I'm going to continue a little bit of error checking and some additional functionality here in this video just to kind of show you how you might get around things like that. Um, so let's just take a look at the scenario that was outlined. So if you were to click login, you're presented with this login screen. Okay, and in the login screen, you enter in the username and the password. But if you were to leave these blank, then what it does is it takes you to the screen that you would take a user to once they're logged in. Now, if you were to try to log in and do, say, B Smith and do, 9874, it does come up and let you know that things are wrong. So from that perspective, it's happening. It's just we don't have all the error checking in place to prevent uh, every scenario. So let's take a look at that real quick. So if we open up our scripts menu, and I'm only recording a portion of my screen. So when this stuff pops up, if it's sticking outside the screen, you may see me drag that back in. Apologize for that. Okay, so let's kind of walk through what our logic is. Basically, we're doing a check, and we're doing a check from the G username field that we have locally here in this table against the users table for username. And if they are a match, then it does this code. Else, if they're not a match, it says there's no matching username. Now, what we're not doing, and there's a few ways around this, what we're not doing is we're not properly checking to make sure that they've entered anything at all. Um, so that's probably the easiest way to address this in the short term. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and uh, click up here, and then I'm just going to add an if statement. Okay, and basically my if statement is going to check to see if these two things have values. Okay, so I am going to do an if statement. I'm going to bring up my calculation window. I'm going to select G username. And one way you could do it is you could do the is empty command. You could also just do G username and then do double quotes here. Sometimes I find that easier just to do that. Then what I'm going to do right after this, if that's empty, uh, certainly what I could do is I could add a custom dialog, but just to get this working so you can see, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to tell it to exit the script. Okay, so if that's empty, exit the script. Okay, I'm going to add another one here. If the other field, which is password, is empty, in which case I also want you to exit the script. Now, obviously, there's a million ways to code. There are things you could do to make this code much more efficient. You could do if G username equals blank, or, and then do an or, and then do if the password equals blank. So if either of those conditions are true. But I find this works just as fine because it's going to work from the top down on my code. So let's go ahead and test this, see how this looks for us. Okay, so if I come back over here and I leave them blank and click OK, now what it's doing is it's just exiting the script. It's not doing anything. Now, there's goods and there's bads with that. Okay, let me show you a good, um, or I mean a bad. So if I do login and say I were to put something in this field, but nothing in that field, then it's still going to exit, which is what you want. You don't want it to log in. But the next time I click login, you'll notice that that field still has that value in it. And the reason why is because there's that subscript that we didn't run that would clear that out. Okay, so let's go back to the code, and this is the code that I'm talking about, this perform script reset globals. So easy way around that is we are just going to duplicate that script step and put it in there just before the exit to where it does clear out those globals. I'm going to hit save and let's try this again. So if I hit login and if I were to enter 1, 2, 3, 4, but I left one blank, okay, when I click login the next time, they are blank. And that's because that that script did run. It cleared the globals before it actually exited the script. So that's one way to quickly fix that. I'll show you, well, maybe not show you, but talk you through, some other ways that you could do that. Instead of doing here in your if this equals that, okay, you could do a number of things. Like you could use that relationship. I will show you, yeah, let me just show you one example. It makes a lot more sense if I show you. So I don't like to have a lot of hidden fields on my login screen, so I try to avoid it as much as I can, but you may not be able to always avoid it. But if I go manage database and my thing popped up way over here, here's my fields. So what I could do is I could do another field, and I'm going to call this like user exists. Okay, and I'm going to make this a calculation field. Okay, and so when I create, it's going to ask me to specify the calculation that it should use. So then what I will do is I will utilize this current table here, and I'll select users. Okay, so I could actually do that same test here. Username equals users and do username. Okay, and what's going to happen is my calculation pops up and it says, okay, this is my test, but I need that to be within an if statement. So I can actually test there, get myself an if statement. Sometimes it's easier just to go. So the if statement wants a test, and then it wants to give you a result. And the second result is going to be if the test fails. So this is my test right here. So I just put my test in there, and my result is going to be 1. Or I could do yes, or I could do any number of things. And my second result would be no. Okay. And the storage is text because I'm not doing a 1 or a 0. I'm using a Y and an N. So I do something like that, right? Okay, so here's my user exist field. Now it's got nothing in it right now. If I do a login and I say okay, and it fails, or if I do a login and I do like B Smith, and I say okay, I don't know if you could see that. In fact, what I need to do is I need to my script ran so quickly that you couldn't see it. So I'm going to delete this reset globals step that we had just put in there. And then I'm going to do this again. So if I do B Smith, when I click OK, it did exit the solution. Okay, it did exit the login, and that's what we wanted to happen. But it also was able to run the test to see, and it came back and it said, yes, that user does exist. If I click login, and this time I do T Smith instead of B Smith, what I get is I get an N. Okay, so no. So it's basically letting me know that that test failed or that test passed. So you could do something like this. You could have like a hidden field that fills up with a 1 or a 0 or a Y or an N or something like that, that just kind of gives you that confirmation. And if you did something like this, then what your script could look like is it could say right here, it could say, instead of saying if this equals that, then do this code, it could say if user exists field equals yes, meaning it does exist, then cool, start running the rest of this code. Otherwise, don't. So there's different ways to handle this. One thing that I was trying to avoid was having too many fields on my layout. Okay, because I've already got these two global fields that I've kind of hidden off over here, and that would just be one more I would have to have. But lo and behold, I could do that. I could also cheat a little bit. I could go to these global fields, and for the sake of error testing, I could go ahead and go to these global fields, and I could say, hey, go ahead and show these in browse mode. So then I don't even have to run the login. I could just go here to this and type in B Smith, and you can't see me typing because my text is actually gray, but I am typing B Smith, and when I tab out of that field, you'll see that this changes to yes. So that's just examples of how you could run that same kind of a test. So I'm turning that back off to where these are pretty much, you can't get into those fields. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this field. And for the sake of this video, I am now going to go back and I'm going to add my reset globals step back in. And I want that reset globals to happen before it exits the script. That way it clears out that those fields. Okay, so I save that. Okay, so that kind of solves our issue where when you go to log in, you can bypass it by entering the wrong value. Now, that being said, there's a lot of things that you could do to lock down your solution. One thing you could do is in your script steps, when you start up this application, you could hide all this information up here, because right now, if this layout is shown, your user could just switch over to the layout themselves. Okay, so you definitely want to hide that stuff. So one example of that would be a startup script. I will almost always make myself a startup script. So let's make a basic startup script, and this is a good habit to get yourself into. Now you need a way out of it. So for the sake of troubleshooting, I usually like to just go ahead and make myself the way out of it first before I make the rest of it. So I'm going to go, and this is something that you would remove later on before you deploy your solution. Okay, so I need to make two scripts. I'm going to make a script that exits the startup and then I'm going to make one that creates the startup. So I need two. So here's what I do is I come over my scripts. I'm just going to close out of these scripts that I'm not using. Okay. My first script that I need to make, I'm going to click plus and I'm going to call this my exit script. Now I know what I'm going to do in my startup script. So I kind of got some foresight as to what I need to exit out of. But this will make more sense in just a moment. So what I want to do is in my exit script, I want to make sure that that layout is visible. Okay. So I just need to find the command that would show and hide that. And if give me just a second and I will find that. I think it might be this toolbars. Let's try it. So I'm going to do this toolbar and I'm going to here, instead of toggle, I'm going to say show. Okay, so that's what my exit script is going to do. Now when I make my startup script, obviously what I want to do there is hide. Okay, so one is going to hide, one is going to show. Okay, so let's try those out and just see what that does. So if I've got my solution here and I have my startup set to run, it runs and you see what it did is it hid those toolbars. It got rid of all that. Okay, but I did mess up just now. I don't know if you noticed that, but I messed up because I didn't assign the exit to my startup, but luckily I can still get to it from the scripts menu because I haven't hidden it there yet. So if I do exit script, then it brings that stuff back. So just real quick, what I'll do is I will set this to perform the script, and the script that I want it to perform is exit. Okay, so that's now set up. Now my startup script, here's what you do with that is within your application, your solution that you're building here. Over here in one of these areas, if I can remember exactly, I think it might be file options. You can set something up for the file to do something here. So we're going to log in, we're switch the layouts, hide all toolbars. Specify a script to be run. So script triggers on first window open. I want it to run my startup. And let's see what this does. I go back here and I go to browse mode. I'm going to close my solution here, and then I'm going to tell it to open, and I'm going to select my login application. And you'll notice as soon as it came up, it immediately switched me into startup mode. It hid those toolbars for me. Okay, and I've got a way out of that by clicking on this exit startup. Okay, so just kind of think through those things because there are some ways you can lock down your solution, and you're going to want to, but there are also some ways that you can kind of get yourself into some trouble and you're like, I'm not sure what to do about that. Now, somehow I entered a character right there in the middle of the screen. Okay, so we've fixed our login problem. We have given ourselves an exit startup, which, by the way, again, you would get rid of this before you deploy your solution. Okay, once you've come up with a more elegant way and there are more elegant ways. Um, One more elegant way would be under this file options, we're telling it to log in using admin, right? So it just goes ahead and logs in using that. Well, if you create multiple users for your account, say I create one called basic, and basic um, didn't let you do certain things, then I would tell it to log in using basic. Okay. And then what you can do is you can hold down the Option key, or I think it's the Alt key on Windows, when you're opening your solution, and that will actually prompt FileMaker to let you type in a different user to log into. So while under File Options, it is going to auto log in using that. Say I created a user called Basic, it's going to always log in with that one. But if I actually switch over by holding down the Option key as I open the file up, it'll pop up with an account screen to where I can enter that. Okay. Suppose it might be more useful if I show you that. So what we want to do here is manage. Trying to remember where I set that up. Accounts. I believe it's just security. Yeah, it's just under security. So right now I've got an admin user with no password. Okay. And it says, ooh, that's not good. But I could create a new account and I could call this basic. Okay. And the password is, it's just going to be the word basic again, all lowercase. Okay. And my privilege set is data entry only. And you can, of course, change this. Okay. FileMaker file, good. So I've got that done. Okay. Now what I need to do is, first what I'll do is I want to navigate. Let me bring up a Finder window and I'm going to navigate to my iCloud drive, wherever I'm storing this stuff at. All right, I'm not going to worry about that right this second, but let me just show you how this works. So if you then go to your file options, I can say log in using basic, lowercase basic. So I say OK. It says the file's automatically going to be opened using that. And if you want to use a different one, you have to use the Option key, or it's actually the Shift key on Windows. So there you go. All right. So then when you close your file, this is what's going to happen. Okay, you go to Open and you select that particular item. What it did is it logged in as basic. Okay, so I am going to lose access to a lot of things. You notice I don't have access to go change the database and do a bunch of things now. So that's what that did. That's how that worked. Meanwhile, if I do Open and I select Login, and I'm going to hold down the Option key because I'm on a Mac, and I click Open, it automatically presents me with a sign in to where I can type in admin, and my admin had no password, and I click sign in, and now all of a sudden I have access to my stuff again. So I've changed it to where it automatically logs in using that basic account. So this is just another example of ways that you can lock down your solution. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep these videos from getting too big and bloated. So we're going to end this one right there. But just to recap, kind of what we did is we looked at the scripts. We looked at the login script. We added a couple of conditions to take care of situations where a user might not enter a piece of data, and it will still handle that okay. We created a login or a startup script. So now in our scripts menu, we now have a script called startup. And that's just a good practice because you're going to find lots of uses for that startup script. Right now, all we're doing is hiding the toolbars, but you could do all sorts of things. One thing to do here, which would be very good practice, would be to go ahead and do a go to layout and just force the user straight to my layout called login. That way they're automatically, no matter what they, uh, where they were at when they last closed the file, it always takes them there. There's a lot of things you might find out that you want to do here. You might want to clean up some records. You might want to run a subscript to do a few checks. There's a lot of things you might find that you wanted to do on startup because that's just when the user gets into the file for the first time. But we also did an exit script to show the toolbars. And that kind of gets us out of that. That kind of protects us there.